Can the Atlanta Hawks win an NBA championship within the next 5 seasons? Let's get into this. This previous season, the Atlanta Hawks for sure proved that they were one of the best up-and-coming young teams we have in the NBA. After a bunch of seasons of just losing seasons for the Atlanta Hawks, not too many people had high expectations for the Hawks coming into this previous season. Many people thought they wouldn't even make the playoffs, but the most optimistic people thought they may make the 7th or 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. The expectations and the bar was definitely not really set high for this Hawks team. And at the beginning of the season and the first half of the season for the Atlanta Hawks, all those people that had low expectations for this Hawks team were all right. The Hawks were struggling tremendously. They were even worse than a lot of people were expecting. They were one of the bottom teams in the Eastern Conference, and on the offensive end, they were fine. They were too talented not to be good on the offensive end, but really where they struggled and what was really holding them back was their defensive ability. They just struggled so tremendously on the defensive side of the ball, and if you can't play defense, you're not going to be a winning team. It's just that simple. But everything changed for the Atlanta Hawks for the better ever since they fired head coach Lloyd Pierce and elevated Nate McMillan to head coach. Nate, when he came into that head coach position, he almost instantly changed the Atlanta Hawks. He was always known as a defensive coach, and that's exactly what the Hawks needed. The Hawks on the offensive end were already such a great team, it didn't really matter that Nate McMillan wasn't known as an offensive coach. That's not what they needed at the time. What they needed was a guy who was a great defensive guru like Nate McMillan was, and ever since that Nate McMillan did get hired for the Atlanta Hawks, or get elevated I should say, the Hawks had one of the best records in the second half of the season, really proving how much they needed that defensive boost. And by the end of the season, the Atlanta Hawks were actually the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference, so at the very least already they broke expectations pretty significantly from what they were coming into the season, and especially considering how bad they were playing in the first half of the season, that was definitely a great accomplishment for this Hawks team. But the Hawks didn't stop there. In the first round matchup against the New York Knicks, a lot of people expected the Knicks to actually win that playoff series, just due to the fact that throughout the entire season the Knicks were just playing great. They had breakout stars like Julius Randle, who actually won Most Improved Player that season, as well as RJ Barrett, who had an absolute breakout season as well, and he honestly could have won Most Improved Player that season as well. They just had 2 legitimate breakout stars. A lot of other players on their team were completely playing amazing as well. They were just playing so well as a team, so overall a lot of people expected the Knicks to win that playoff series, but people did think it would be kind of close. But that's not what turned out to be whatsoever. The Atlanta Hawks actually won in a gentleman's sweep 4-1 against the New York Knicks, which was a huge surprise and a big accomplishment for that Hawks team already. But then moving on to the next series against the Philadelphia 76ers, that series a lot of people thought the Hawks played great in that Knicks series, but nobody, absolutely nobody expected the Hawks to actually beat the Sixers team. The Sixers team is just coming off one of their best seasons together with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. They were the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. They had a great offense going for them. They were amazing on the defensive end. They were one of the best defensive teams we have in the NBA, and a lot of people thought that you could just put Ben Simmons on Trae Young and completely neutralize him and completely shut him down, and if Trae Young is shut down, then the Atlanta Hawks are done. But once again, the Atlanta Hawks did not let that happen, and they actually won that series in 6 games against the Philadelphia 76ers, which was a complete shock, and a lot of people were completely surprised by that. Overall, the Hawks just played great team basketball. Obviously, Trae Young was definitely their leader, and he was a great leader for them, putting up amazing performances, and overall, he was the main reason why the Hawks were able to win this playoff series, but tons of players completely stepped up on their team. John Collins, Kevin Huerter, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Danilo Gallinari, they had so many different players step up for them in that series, and they just played great team basketball. While on the other end, the Philadelphia 76ers had a bunch of problems in that playoff series, and the Atlanta Hawks defense that they were able to pressure on the Sixers definitely had a big effect on that. And now the Atlanta Hawks were moving to the Eastern Conference Finals, when everybody coming into the season didn't even know if the Hawks would make the playoffs, and if they did, a lot of expectations were they would make the 7th or 8th seed. So this was an absolute amazing accomplishment for the Atlanta Hawks, and this young roster is very talented and very special going forward, of course, if they're already able to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals this early. In this series against the Milwaukee Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Atlanta Hawks definitely got a lot more respect. I think more people than not thought the Milwaukee Bucks were going to win, but there were a decent amount of people that were starting to form that thought the Atlanta Hawks definitely had a great opportunity to win this playoff series, including myself. The reasoning for that is just based on how well the Atlanta Hawks were playing in the first 2 playoff series against the New York Knicks, given it was their first time making the playoffs with that young group, but then playing as well as they did against the Philadelphia 76ers was a real eye-opener to me personally and a lot of other fans around the NBA. And a lot of people thought at that point that this Hawks team was definitely legit and they could definitely beat this Milwaukee Bucks team and make it to the NBA Finals. But unfortunately for the Hawks did not end up winning that playoff series. Trae Young did get hurt and maybe that changed the series a little bit, but either way I think the Milwaukee Bucks probably would have still won. But obviously the Milwaukee Bucks did end up going on to win the NBA championship, so it was definitely not something that the Hawks should really look down upon. The Hawks had an amazing season this season and they completely overachieved this year and should be very proud of it. But now let's answer the question of the video, and that is, can the Atlanta Hawks win an NBA championship within the next 5 seasons? So it's quite clear that this Hawks team is definitely very well set up to win an NBA championship within the next 5 seasons. They just re-signed Trae Young and they also re-signed John Collins for at least 5-6 seasons, so they're going to be locked up with this team for a long time. And both of those players are very good players. Trae Young's obviously, in my opinion, I think he's elite, and he proved during this playoff run that he is elite and a superstar, a true superstar in this league. But besides those 2 main players they have on their team, they also have a lot of other really good young players on their team as well. They have Bogdan Bogdanovic, who in my opinion is such an underrated player and such a great player in this league. Also, Kevin Huerter is really good and very young as well. Cam Reddish, if Cam Reddish could ever figure it out, then this team is absolutely going to get ridiculous because they're already super deep and they're also pretty top heavy as well. They're kind of the best of both worlds where they have a great bench, but also when you talk about their starting lineup, they're also very talented. Also, Kevin Huerter also had a pretty good season this previous year. Clint Capella is a very good young player as well. When you just look around this team's roster, they're just so talented and so young, and you would expect all these players that I mentioned to get better going forward. And if they were already able to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals this season so early in their careers, just imagine what they could do in the next 2, 3, maybe 4 seasons when these guys have more seasons under their belt, more playoff experience, and just more off seasons to really work on their game and get better. The real key to the success for the Atlanta Hawks is obviously Trae Young. Trae Young is obviously a legitimate superstar in this league, and he's a great three-point shooter. He came into the NBA as a great three-point shooter. He can shoot all the way back to even half court if he really wanted to. But one thing he kind of added into his game was getting to the basket a little bit more in that pick and roll offense, and in my opinion, that's what really unlocked Trae Young. Now he's able to run that pick and roll with Clint Capella, and he's able to either put up that floater when getting into the lane, getting all the way to the basket and putting up that layup, or he can get in that same motion as if he were to put up that layup and throw up that lob to Clint Capella. So it makes it very difficult on a defense to guard Trae Young, and I think that's the real key to him. But besides just Trae Young personally, of course you have Clint Capella, which helps out Trae Young specifically, but all the other players on their team can all catch and shoot and are great catch and shoot three-point shooters like Kevin Huerter, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Gallinari, John Collins, but they can all create for themselves, which I think is the biggest key. Because first of all, when Trae Young's on the court, that takes a ton of pressure off Trae Young, of course. But when Trae Young isn't on the court, when you have guys that can create for themselves, there isn't a complete drop-off when your star comes out of the game like Trae Young does. And we see whenever Trae Young does come out of the game, the bench unit for the Hawks is pretty good and doesn't completely fall off like other teams in the NBA, specifically the Los Angeles Lakers, because they had a big issue. Whenever LeBron James would come out of the game, their team would just completely fumble the lead if they had it, or if they were down, that their deficit would get extended whenever LeBron would come out of the game. But with the Hawks, that's definitely not the issue. But if I had to answer the question, do I personally think the Hawks are going to win an NBA championship within the next 5 seasons? I definitely think they're positioned to, and if I had to guess, I would say yeah, I do think they are going to win one. I think they're just too talented, and how good Trae Young is, especially in the playoffs, just completely being not phased, I think is a huge thing. And with all the young players they already have on their team now already with playoff experience, I would think they would only get better going forward. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think this Atlanta Hawks team could win an NBA championship within the next 5 seasons, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that post notification bell. It really helps me out a lot. Until the next time, peace out, guys.